and I had a freezers empty.
Which is fine because the higher the students, the better.
I don't have a gavel. I'd like to call to order the Planning and Commission meeting for September 6th, 2023. Roll call.
Arel. Here. Hudke.
Here.
Kuhn.
Here.
Munski.
Here.
Madsen.
Here.
Reichert.
Here.
Sandy.
Here.
Bosick.
Here.
We have quorum.
All right. Reading and approval for the minutes from the July 12th meeting and the August 2nd meeting. We'll back it today. Those are 2 3-hour meetings, so does anybody? Mr. Reichert, Mr. Budke?
I had one item here in the August minutes under 3.7. I asked Haley to verify this. There's a note that I have opposed taking something off the table, and that was incorrect. I think everybody agreed to take the item off the table after it was initially tabled. So if we can make that correction.
Okay. I would accept that. Okay. Then do I have a second?
Yep.
All right. All those in favor of approving the minutes with the amendment, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Minutes are approved and amended. All right. Public hearings, final approvals, nothing. Communications and preliminary approvals, 4-1.
Ordinance to amend zoning map to approve Carrie's second PUD amendment number 7, rezoning at the 900 block of 60th Avenue South.
Got this one.
That's me. I'm trying to, it looks different on my screen, so let me.
Stare at Jamie or still?
Okay, so this item is a request to rezone this block here outlined in red. That's right north of 60th Avenue South and between David Drive and Cherry Street, rezoning from R1 to R2. The purpose of the rezoning would be to allow single-family attached twin homes, which are not currently permitted in R1 zoning, which explicitly states detached single-family homes. Staff feels that this additional density added with the R2 rezoning would work to further buffer the single-family to the north, which you can kind of see up there, from the multifamily to the south. The final layout of the lots will come later on with a replat, and it may include a mixture of detached and attached single-family homes or fully one or the other. The rezoning now is being sought to determine their development possibilities prior to finalizing the plat and the design. They also did notice a neighborhood meeting 800 feet around. It was held in City Hall in August, but no one attended. So staff's recommending approval of rezoning, and I can stand for any questions.
Does anybody have any questions? I don't see a public hearing on this one. Does anybody have any questions?
Are there any houses up there in what is listed as SF5, single family?
Yes. The one side is almost done. So the north side of David Drive is about complete.
Those lots are sold already around this?
There's houses already built.
There's houses, I think there's maybe one left, maybe 2, under construction on David Drive.
I'm not sure how many are sold. I don't, people have looked there, but there's quite a few houses on the north side of David Drive, where it runs east-west.
Yeah. I know we talked about this last time. I'm still not in favor of this at all. It is, if anybody's driven down there, again, it's a congestion nightmare. Again, I think we talked about this at the last meeting. Single family, when you purchase a single family home in a single family area and you're zoned around single family, that's what your expectations are. Again, I'm not in favor of this at all.
Mr. Budke?
Yeah, just to clarify one thing, because you said last time, because we did talk about David Drive, and I think that request was specific about like lot size and the plat of like how wide the lots are.
So they wanted
zoning.
Correct. Right, but the intent's still the same, right? To create more homes on that block.
I don't know if that's the ultimate design
design, they don't have a final layout of how they want to place it. Giving the option of having attached may address the congestion issue in the sense that it could have then shared driveways as well as that shared lot line, so we may end up getting more on-street parking. But final layout hasn't been submitted, so we don't know for sure. They're going forward with the rezoning just to see if they could have the option to go forward and even try to design an attached layout and see
Okay,
how that
will
would
there be on-street parking? Because David Drive, you currently, Luann, you are not able to park on the street. So now you have two driveways butted up next to each other. Where do people park? Those driveways aren't wide enough to fit the cars of the people that live there.
Ideally, if we have them joined together, then we have additional space between the other where they are detached to get that. The plat, we could certainly evaluate at the time the plat coming in, the lot widths and the driveway layouts, if that's a concern. The question here that they're trying to impact, and maybe Mike could speak a little bit to this, is just, do they have even the option of trying to design something that has the shared space and then shared wall to try to get that on-street parking, or are they strictly limited to the single-family zoning that's currently in place?
So with Toby Lane, how are they doing Toby Lane? Is that different then?
So Toby Lane's a completely different type of development, because that's all private streets, and those are much narrower lots. Than what we're looking at here. We are limited on 45% impervious. That's what the storm sewer system is designed for. So, we can't do probably anything as narrow as like Toby Lane is. The reason for bringing it in now is because there's no, that future roadway is actually not even there yet. So there's no homes on the north side of that. On the north side of 60th Avenue, on the south side, it's already zoned as R2. This would just be similar to what's across the street on that. And so the reason to bring it in now is because Thompson Homes owns most of those lots right now, either that or they're undeveloped. That would be right adjacent to the development.
I don't
So
miss,
do they own the R2 area? That's just a field right now.
Which R2 are you talking about?
Well, on the bottom of this.
Like R25?
Yeah. Is that what you're saying? So that'll be Thompson Homes too?
I don't know if Cray owns that right now, Thompson Homes, but eventually it'll be Thompson Homes. But that street's not even there yet.
Correct, right.
So basically, the 60th goes over to David Drive, I think it was north and around to Cherry.
And Steve, just so you know, Megan does have her hand up.
I was just trying to call on him before I get interrupted again. Megan, go ahead. You had a question?
Yeah, no, I have a comment. I'm also not going to support this. We just had this discussion about the density, and I feel like this neighborhood already is more dense than we probably should have ever allowed. I'm also concerned about bringing this and asking us to change the zoning without the plat. Typically, what we see is that they both come at the same time. And so I'm certainly uncomfortable changing zoning, not knowing if they're doing single family, a mix of single family and townhouses, all townhouses. It seems to me that would be, I guess I don't understand the advantage. So R2 will allow them a higher density?
It's limited to single family or duplex, which in this case would be a single family attached home. Because I don't think they're trying to do a duplex 2 on 1 lot.
Okay. So is the density higher in an R2?
I think by code it probably is. I don't know the exact number. They're still limited to the existing lot width requirements. So if anything, they'd have to abide by those. And
So what I'm seeing here, and what I'm concerned will happen, is that this is a way, it was denied last time when they tried to increase the density, and this is a roundabout way to come and do sort of the same thing, because if they're putting single family homes and attached homes, what they're really doing is increasing their density and getting us to changing the zoning before we see and approving the plat at the same time is a can of worms, and I'm not interested in increasing the density in this neighborhood at all. Because it is a higher density in R2 than it is single family.
Mr. Reichert? Megan, I'm just looking at the chart on the bottom. It looks like the R1 is 5 to 7 or 5 to 9 residents per acre, and this proposed R2 is 10. So anywhere from double to just a little bit more.
I think we need to remember that this development was already given a variance to increase their density. And in hindsight, when I drive through there and I see how close the houses are and how difficult it is for street parking or anything else, I feel like we probably didn't make a very good choice. The city council probably didn't make a very good choice. And so this is increasing it even more than what they've already been given.
Comments? Mr. Budke? Mr. Wood? Go ahead. Whoever wants to go.
Okay. So I think I have to agree with the comment about the plat and the zoning coming in simultaneously. Like it is hard, I feel, to evaluate one without the other. And I seem to recall the staff report did make mention that there'd be some sort of a mix, at least potentially, of the different like housing formats. But be that as it may, and setting that aside, I mean, I do feel like when we were last talking about this part of town, that was what, a couple months ago, my takeaway was, you know, there were some issues with the particular design, but also it seems to me that we're like reaching a point where the market, honestly, just doesn't seem to support like a particular idealized version of a single family. Like, I'm not sure if the developer, I don't think they're here, if they were would speak to this, but what I recall was that there just was not interest in or the ability to pay for a house that maybe was originally imagined here. I feel like I'm rambling.
You're saying that the R1, the standard 50-foot lot plus lots, whatever, they've already requested the 5 foot. That the market is driving those smaller lots, and that I get it. Yeah.
Right, and like the interest in them that they're getting from potential buyers and their clientele. So
Andrew, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I would have to, and Jenny is a realtor as well, but I would have to disagree with that. They're certainly selling the houses that they're building. They don't build them until they have a contract on the house. And so it's hard for someone to go out and see, hey, how many are available and how many are under contract, because they're not always out listed. But I would say that when I'm working with buyers, most are looking for a single family detached home. Affordability is a problem in our town, which is separate from this. And making these smaller lot sizes have not decreased the cost to the home buyer. These homes per square foot are the same or more than the homes over by Discovery School on larger lots. So I don't think this is being driven by the buyers.
Mr. Kuhn?
Mine was just, I don't like when you've got somebody buys a lot or a house and then rechanging zoning for what's next to it. This may not be, from what I'm looking at, apparently it's the north side of SF5 that is developed. The south side isn't. So anybody buying on that side now would probably have an opportunity to at least know that something was coming. But again, I just don't like the idea of changing the zoning when you've already got the development there.
We made a promise to a gentleman last month that we would not change zoning on that other neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And I see the same exact piece of land that's just going to be in a different neighborhood that we're going to be faced with. And we sat there and said, no, this won't be. So I agree with Mr. Kuhn that I worry about the south of David Drive, or whatever you want to call the bottom hook of SF4 on David Drive. Are those developed and ready? Now they're facing a duplex versus a single family home. And are they okay with, did they know that going in? Did they, you know what I mean? All this stuff we've been trying to do for 10 years I've been on here is make people aware, hang signs, get out in the neighborhood and hang signs. If you're a contractor or builder, saying what this is zoned, so when you buy a house 2 years later, it's not an apartment across from you or a duplex or whatever you have. That's kind of where we've been going, making these contractors. So where's the development signs out here and what do they say? That's what I want to know, because that's something we put in here, and we've been pretty hard on some of these developers to do that. Do they have those out there already? So they'll have to change them all?
I don't believe there's, in this particular development, I don't believe that there is a sign.
Why not? Because we were very stringent on putting that in the documents. Alex was here. I'm not sure if Jamie was, but Alex and I were here.
I was there and I recall very clearly that there should be a sign out there saying basically showing this map.
A map of the development with the zoning. Because when we got in all this trouble over apartments going across from people's dream homes, I'll never forget the lady holding a picture of her home in the front row of the city council meeting or city hall, saying that was her dream home and you built an apartment across from it. After that, we put in that rule. And if there's not signs out there, I don't want to hear it. There we go. That's my thought. Mr. Aker.
Well, you know, I like the idea of putting an R2 buffer in there, because there's going to be, if you go down a little bit more, there's going to be a multifamily right below that. There's going to be an apartment building right there in that brown spot. So as much buffer as we can get in there. But I also like the point that's been made of, I want to see it. I mean, I want the plat before I do it. And I'd like to do it as soon as possible before we develop the bottom of SF5, you know, so that it, you know, nobody's built on that south side yet. If we're going to change it, now's the time. But I'm going to vote against it too. In fact, I'll make the motion that we don't approve it, because that seems to be where we're going. Keep the discussion going. Because while I understand what the planning department is trying to do here, I understand what the developer is trying to do. I don't think we're ready. I think we need more details.
Let's get a second. Do we have a second on that?
I'll second.
A second.
Staff's recommendation might be to table, because if they do bring
I
a
thought of
plat
that too.
forward and it does include an attached, you are denying the rezoning. Now, your motion denies the rezoning.
I was going to say,
But can't they just bring them back at the same, when they bring back the plat?
it would be better to table.
It'd be better to table, because there's some rule about you can't bring the exact same request.
Oh, okay, that's fine then. I'll change my motion to a table then.
I just wanted to clarify something. I'm looking at an aerial map from the spring, and none of the lots on the west side of David Drive are developed at this point. Do we know if any of those lots are developed now?
I know there's one house on David Drive that.
But it would be directly across the street from the.
That one was not directly.
Okay. Just some of the questions there.
Go ahead, Mr. Corman, you had your hand up too.
So, I think that'd be helpful if you could kind of give us some guidance of where you want us to come up, because we've been getting denied a lot lately when we bring things in. And so I'd like to get maybe get the temperature of the commission on what are we looking at? What kind of lot widths do you guys want? What's acceptable? What isn't acceptable? Because we just did a whole bunch of 38-foot wide lots on 41st Avenue South. And we've done them on Luann Street. But now we're hearing that we don't want the 38-foot wide lots, we need something wider, but I don't know what it is.
My understanding,
So
we're kind of a test pattern over there, approved to kind of see how it would go, in Ryan's words last month at Luann. They kind of let it happen. Everybody agreed, let's try it to see how it would go. And it doesn't sound, from what I'm hearing, that it's great, but I don't know that myself. I don't live there.
I don't know that staff has a recommendation on a certain lot width, but I think the direction could be back to Mike of, if the board would be in favor of our commission, you know, is an attached would that be acceptable if there is on-street, and show us the distance between driveways and show that that can actually provide on-street parking? Would an attached scenario be acceptable in that route, or would it strictly, detached? Because that's what essentially they have to do in the subdivision. If it's detached, they're designing to the detached level. But is it attached acceptable given certain parameters, I guess?
There's also things we can do with this as far as putting driveways next to each other, either on the same, say if it's a duplex or a twin home, you can put them right next to each other, or you can put them on the outside, so that the driveways are kind of grouped together. You can also do things with community mailboxes, to kind of help with some of the parking issues too. But I need a little guidance here from the commission to see what you guys are looking for. So when we come in with things, I'll be honest, it's pretty costly for the developer to come in and just get denied all the time when we don't even know what we need to get to get it.
I guess
I would only be really interested in approving or in moving forward with single family. I think my understanding is we've already given a higher density, and I'm not interested in changing this into townhouses. It's I guess as a commission, we've never from wanting this to be single family, so I don't feel like I don't think there should be any mixed messages here. I think that the intent was single family. It's already been given increased density, and I think the developer should just move forward with that.
I'll also add in with particular Thompson Homes, and I know what they're trying to keep them affordable, so I get that. But if you drive down Luann or David, and I keep using those as examples because those are my most recent, most familiar, driveways their garages aren't always, I'm not going to say all of them, aren't always, the garages aren't big enough for you to put 2 cars in. Okay, so inevitably what happens is you have one car in the garage because you have other things you need to put in your garage. You have a car in the driveway. I'm pretty sure there's a sailboat still sitting on someone's driveway. And then you now have a teenage driver or 2 teenage drivers. And where do they park? So it's to me, that's a bigger issue than not agreeing with the 38-foot lots or whatever. It's just, I think, and maybe that's a conversation to have with Thompson Homes. From my perspective, you cannot fit 2 family-sized cars in their garages. So that to me becomes a bigger issue than a size of of the lot. I love row houses. I love duplexes. I love all of those. But all things being considered, it just doesn't work with the types of homes that they are putting on there, with driveways, with vehicles, and not being able to park on the street. Boats and campers and all of it.
The only other thing that I kind of go the other side on is that, they had a neighborhood meeting and no one showed up. So do they know about it? Are we getting it out there? Is there enough people that know even what they just moved in? They got stuff going on. They don't even know what really happened here.
Yep.
So you should have hit Luann Drive with that 800 feet, right?
800 feet.
Every direction. Well, and to answer your question, Mike, I think we're, to put it in the idea of law, and what I deal with all the time is, you're asking us to make a change. So you need to convince us. I mean, the idea should be, it's not going to change. Tell us why you should. And I think if you're seeing denials, I don't think that we've been denying a lot, but maybe we have. But if we have, and what do you tell your developers, when they come to you, is say, look, we've got to make a case. It's not going to be automatic. If we want to change things, we need to make a case for that. And I know that this entire group would be more than happy to have you come in to a meeting and say, we're thinking about this before you spend a bunch of money, before you can take our temperature, I don't think anybody here would have a problem with that. And say, I don't know, let me go talk to the commission, tell them what you're thinking before we spend a lot of money. And just sort of lay that out there.
Well, I think our planning department, no offense, needs to know the temperature of this board too, and be more proactive thinking of how we're going to react. Ryan told me about this the other day when he called and said he's not going to be here, and I said, oh boy. What do you mean? I said, you really don't think, Ryan, you guys pass this off not thinking that we're going to have issues with it? So I really, not to scold you, I'm kind of pulling a Christensen here. Doug, wow. But I think we need to, maybe you guys provide us more, or, get in our heads a little bit to know that, hey, this ain't going to fly.
That's a tightrope, rope to walk. We don't want to presume that the commission may or may not, but
I know,
certainly the temperature.
but you're presuming we will if you recommend approval.
The idea,
It's a tightrope.
The idea of the use of an attached use is possible and could make things better. But to your point, and should a plat have come with it, and would that have made the decision in the case a little bit easier, even on a concept level? Yep, I get that. It's hard to react. I also get the flip side of even give me preliminary approval to go and do an attached and bring it back with the plat for final or something like that. Because I think they have to work within the framework of lot widths, and parking is definitely heard. Staff doesn't, professionally, attached could work and alleviate some of the parking issues. But if the idea is to maintain the detached that exists, that would be up to the commission. And so that's where your thoughts and kind of feedback come into that piece of
And
it.
that's what we're, like Mr. Riker said so eloquently, we're happy to take that, to give a person like Mr. Corman or somebody a spot on this once in a while to say, hey, this is what we're thinking in these areas. A whole general thing. I think what really drives us to put our brakes on is when we do a big PUD and then we start piecemealing it different. I think that's what we get nervous on, because then we get the fallout on that.
I have a question for Andrea, if I could. Andrea, you just said that you were thinking that doing attached homes would make this better from how the original plan is, or better from what we denied last time?
Better in the sense that it could alleviate some of the on-street parking. An attached framework with shared driveways and maybe a little bit wider lots could actually get us some on-street parking where detached and detached driveways don't. So from the parking perspective, I do think it has the potential, but that is all dependent on the lot widths they do come forward and request and how those widths come in between. And so is it a sure thing? No, we'd have to evaluate the plat and what those actual footprints of the buildings look on the lots in order to determine that. But it could give them another tool to go forward with and try to make that work a little bit better.
So I understand too that, I still think we're better off with single family. I think that maybe this is better than what was denied, but I would encourage people to drive down Toby Lane, because there is no parking on the street on Toby Lane either. I understand or there is minimum parking. I understand that that's a private road, so the road is more narrow. I don't believe that the lots are the lots smaller, because that's what we're talking about, not the width of the road.
I think those lots on Toby Lane, if I remember right, I think they're 32.5 feet wide. And 115 feet.
Easy way to do it. Smaller houses or bigger lots. Pick your poison.
Right.
33.
Just a dumb
Roughly.
contractor.
Yeah,
here,
this just the one that I pulled up. They might not all be exactly the same, but picked up an
Or buy future roadway and make it your own private road.
What you want?
So
I think what we're learning is that the front-loaded single-family homes on 38s or maybe even smaller than 40s, they just get too tight. I don't know if there's a different design to kind of alleviate that or what, but.
Or can you mix them up? I mean, instead of having all of them together, put sprinkle in some bigger lots in there.
I think the feedback back to Mike is probably to prioritize on-street parking in however that may come about. And I think that the spin-off effect of that will probably alleviate some of the densities that Megan kind of referred to, because once you space those out, your side yards end up being a little bit bigger just because of their product, or maybe not. But that spin-off of on-street parking could have that, but that's hard to determine what that final lot size might be. But if Mike's asking for feedback, I think that's a very loud and clear one.
Because when you get more density, it's just like a commercial property. When you get more density, you need more parking. And if you're going to build an apartment building, you got a huge apartment lot. Here we're having massive density, but clearly not enough parking for it, so I don't know how you get more parking but it sounds like you have some ideas.
That's why you really get it. Unless you're really, really deep and go really long driveways, but that doesn't really work either.
Or mix it up, don't have all these little lots all right next to each other.
On this particular one, they're not really sure what they're going to build there. They just wanted some more flexibility built into it. That's why I did bring the plat in.
I think hopefully we've given you some ideas now. You can come in with a plat that maybe might make sense.
Things have changed a lot for Thompson Homes in the last few years. Over in Prairie 7th Edition, they were selling some of the larger homes, a little bit larger, a little larger. Now with the interest rates higher, the ones that are really selling more are the ones like on Toby Lane. And I think a lot of it's just because of the cost, the mortgages.
I think a little bit of a difference there too is that the ones on Toby Lane are being built as specs. They're not being built with the purchase agreement, and so they're readily available, and that makes a difference as well, because Thompson Homes is taking the risk of speculating those townhouses, where they're not doing that with their single family homes. They'll build models to build off of, but those models aren't for sale. So most buyers who are looking now want a house now. And so I don't know that is necessarily because they're a twin home and the price is lower, or because that's just what's available right now.
Okay, I think we beat this gong enough. So we got a motion and a second on the floor. Do we want to?
Well, I try to figure out. I changed mine to table, and you were fine with that.
Yep.
Okay,
So it's a motion to table then.
all right. No discussion on the table. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion is tabled. 4-1 is tabled. 4-2.
Ordinance to amend Chapter 18 Land Development Code sections as relates landscaping and buffer yard requirements, Section 18-0204 rules and definitions, Section 18-0309 landscaping, Section 18 Appendix A and Appendix B.
Do we just see this once?
This would be a code amendment, so this would be a two-time through planning, zoning, and city council. And so what we're looking at is the landscaping code is one of those codes that we've known has probably been underperforming for some time, but it's been kind of one of those things that we'll get to it. Low-hanging fruit. It was a great opportunity to introduce the new planners to a code update in terms of an in-house process, and so I thought that was a good one to kind of tackle and get them kind of underway. The current code has 8 different buffer yards utilized depending on who's next to who. We've heard feedback over the years that they're too dense, the plants don't survive, it's a maintenance nightmare and things like that. And true, buffer yards do have a purpose of being a maintenance nightmare and creating that screening effect. But for the most part, from commercial to commercial or something like that, the existing code is a little bit more intense than maybe a realistic approach would be. So that was part of our process to kind of streamline it and make it more realistic, more enforceable as well, and look at those different things.
We reached out to area nurseries and landscaping companies just to learn and verify all that and get maybe some more specific details. Major change out of those discussions was the planting schedule, removing shrubs from the required plantings. They provide an aesthetic piece, certainly, but from an enforceable standpoint and even a property maintenance, shrubs become the easiest thing to kind of ditch, after a city enforcement or something like that. So tried to focus that more onto trees. Still recommend shrubs in our suggested plantings list, still recommend them to anyways. Those who are trying to achieve a higher aesthetic, our commercial properties or retail or whatever, are already putting shrubs in, but they became an issue with, say, like our industrial lots or something like that, trying to enforce them with that. So that was a big part of the plantings. The other big part of the code change that we went through, whoops, I got a little too happy with my touchscreen, is adding some flexibility for the city planner. Previously, city planner was allowed to drop a buffer yard in one letter grade. We'd like to change that after looking at some different communities' codes to give that a little bit more flexibility. There's special circumstances with the lot. There's a 50-foot Magellan pipeline easement or something like that that prohibits plantings. To have the city planner work with the developer and approve a plan, a landscaping plan that would work with the special circumstances and hardships of the lot. So that was another big change of the code. So with that, we also adjusted the appendix, which goes into what buffer yard will be used when adjacent to what properties, as well as you'll see the renderings kind of showing the updated buffer yards, what a new buffer yard A or a buffer yard B or those type of things may schematically look like. So general overview of that, and stand for any questions you might have.
Anyone have any questions? Mr. Riker? Yeah, I'm going to move approval of this, but what I'm going to ask Andrea is that you give us either at final approval, hopefully before, can you give us like a half-hour presentation on this? Because I think that, I tried to read this many times, and I would guess that when you studied this, you probably had a whole semester class on this. And I think it's incredibly important, and I really want to understand this, and I want to give you feedback, and I want to make sure we're doing the right thing here, but I think there's no rush. I think we need to be deliberate about it, and I'd like you to explain more than these words and pictures tell me, because I know that there's a lot of thought went into this, and I know that there are a lot of competing ideas on and thoughts. So,
and I'm also a very visual person. So for you to say, okay, so we found that this hasn't worked, and this is what triggered our thoughts to move this forward, right? Because I would go, oh yeah, that does, or I would say, I wish it would look like this because this didn't work. So I'm right with Alex.
Sure, yeah. I could have done a better job presenting that, and I don't know that you can quite see, but like even our existing buffer yard D, you can tell how dense that planting is shown on the schematics, and we've heard from nurseries that they won't survive. So you're asking us to charge clients to put these plants in, and it's just not feasible for them to live. We are by no means arborists. Is that the term? Yeah. I don't know. There we go. And so part of that was us learning too about what might survive and what might not. And I can't say that we know for sure, but we have a little bit with that suggested planting, better idea of what to recommend. So I wouldn't say we're plant experts in that regard, but we can certainly go through the different scenarios and provide a better presentation.
Yeah, maybe just run around town if you, like you said, if you've got a pipeline here, okay, we can't plant 12 evergreens right here because of this, but what could we do, Yeah, that'd be super.
Okay, you got a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
What was my motion? To approve?
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't know. I think I said I was going. I think I'm going to.
Okay.
Yeah.
You did.
Well, I'll make a motion then.
Provided that, so I would like
Make
the
a
other
motion,
information.
Yes.
I'm on you. I'm watching you.
I guess one feedback I'd like is the idea of removing the shrubs kosher, or should we be looking? I guess that was probably the biggest change between what we
did before and what we propose now. And we can do the presentation scenarios, but just preliminarily for feedback, is that something that's acceptable or?
Well, again, I would say define a
I have
shrub.
no idea. Yes, yeah.
Like, what's a shrub?
I have no
Like
idea.
what-
Mr. Budke had his hand up, maybe he can enlighten us.
Yeah.
None of this.
You're not a landscape architect either, are you?
I'm not, no. But yeah, I did have a couple of like notes that I jotted down when I like scanned through here, and yeah, I don't feel like I have a command.
Do you have somebody from your office that could come in and help educate us as well?
Oh boy.
Oh, boy.
Just kidding. Well, I mean, we do encounter these, right? I mean, when, like if a client comes to us and there's review all of the codes, whether those are building codes or the planning and zoning codes, to like begin the site layout. So yeah, for a lot of clients, especially locally, that means looking at their buffer yard. So I know that like, yeah, people from like coworkers of mine have, been here probably before this body talking about buffer yards. So I don't know if that answers your
I
question,
remember
but
Ironhide being a good buffer
Yeah.
yard conversation.
Yes.
Yes. It seems like we used to talk about this
I flipped those pages to get to the electrical sheets.
a lot. I see them on the blueprint.
Very good.
So a couple of things that I noticed are like questions maybe that I had. One thing I noticed in here that I didn't recognize from before was this idea of like the shade trees in the parking lots, which I don't think you mentioned, but seem to be in there. I like that idea of having, right, like sort of requiring to have some sort of a tree canopy, shade trees.
Even in our existing code, we have a requirement that 5% of parking lots will be landscaped, which essentially ends up being a tree in a parking lot island. We've heard feedback depending on who you are and if you're a tree hugger or not, and that's probably not the right term, but you guys will.
We understood.
Whether those islands are big enough to support the length of a tree and kind of those different things. But so it depends on where you kind of fall with landscaping. Is you walk the line of aesthetics and cost and function. So
But I think
And
you added,
maintenance.
and maintenance, correct.
but I think you added like a definition for shade tree in here and specifically for parking lots as opposed to like a percentage, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And I just asked my colleagues here. We didn't have a definition of a shrub. So to your point, it was like a shrub. Like,
So if you walk in and you ask for a shrub, that's what you get. Like, I don't know.
Wherever the existing code is kind of so open-ended that way that a landscape architect could come in and recommend this shrub. And the guy down the street is like,
And I'm fine with no shrubs because to me they're a maintenance nightmare. So when you say, are you okay with no shrubs? I'm like, well, yeah, because I don't want to prune them. But maybe not. My definition of my visual of a shrub might be different than someone else's.
and our intent with that is to let those who still want to put them in your commercials, your gas stations, or like Holiday did a very lovely shrub, whatever, on 40th and South Washington. And they're going to do that anyway because they're trying to meet a higher market aesthetic. Acquiring shrubs on an industrial lot probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Unless it's buffering, unless it's truly trying to screen a buffer from a single family home.
Mr. Leslie.
I know there's a particular parking lot in town. It was a bank building. They had some very nice, tall, beautiful established trees right next to the parking lot. No one would park under them because the trees are driven. Now they just took them all out. The whole property line, like now it's all gone. So do we want to recommend putting trees right next to parking? I don't know. Or does it have to be set back 20 feet?
And that becomes an enforcement piece.
Or I don't know. I'm just like, these are questions I'm asking. So they waited until those trees were really big and no one parked there. They cut them all down. Now they use the parking spots.
And that becomes an enforcement piece because they're still required to have a buffer yard there. So then, once staff knows about that or get a complaint or whatever, then we have to go through the process of, hey, you do have to maintain the buffer yard. Conversations seem to be a little bit easier, like, hey, you have to maintain trees versus, hey, you have to maintain trees plus shrubs plus evergreens plus that. And so it becomes a little bit more of a realistic conversation and collaboration with staff than in the property owner. We do strictly abide by when it truly is a screening element. If we're trying to screen a residential from a commercial or an industrial or those type of things, there's there's less flexibility that we've done at the staff level to work with somebody on that. But if it's commercial next to commercial and they don't want to put their shrubs back in, but they'll maintain the trees, it's been a collaborative, like, okay, that's good. So there's been some bargaining. All of that kind of bargaining falls outside of the existing code. And so this kind of code update was partly us trying to get a better handle on what we think we should be doing and what minimum standards we should be holding the line to and not negotiating with on, and then giving us flexibility with pipelines and things like that to have that flexibility. So that probably all should have been part of the presentation, but
I don't think you were saying you did something wrong.
No,
You said
no.
as you come, this is preliminary,
Mhm.
so as you come back,
it's a big thing to kind of wrap
Wow,
your
it
head
It is a
around.
lot, and
It's a
I think
lot.
it's really important. I mean, I think these buffer yards can really make the difference in how our city looks. I really do. I think if done right and done in a mixture of ways that is stringent enough to look nice, but flexible enough that people will follow it without it being forced to do it in
And
an
that's a
inspections night.
reality kind of gut check for us. I will say when we get to buffer yards as part of the site plan process, we're all like, oh, buffer yards. So it's a good gut check and reference for us to go back and be like, no, there is a point and a purpose, and dive deeper into it.
I mean, I really would like to see, and I know that this might be difficult, but I would like to see if we can, a landscape architect and somebody from a nursery come in here and talk to it.
I mean, in our market, it's mostly landscape contractors. We don't have a lot of landscape architects
Okay.
that are.
I mean, if we could get somebody like that can come in and say, you guys are crazy on this. I mean, I'm sure they're telling you, but I wouldn't mind hearing from them. what
And we
they're-
can certainly table it. There is no rush in that regard too, so it doesn't have to move forward if it.
I don't
Well,
mind
it's a
giving
preliminary.
preliminary approval because, but just knowing that I don't plan on giving final approval until I feel more comfortable with it.
And I'm sure, like,
Speaking
all seasons are
Final
changing.
approval. That's one of my comments as I go through it. The bond and cash escrow requirement on this, I've been burned by this in the past. First off, I would move that up with the permitting under 2 as a separate bullet from 11. Kind of separates the two. I just lumped that as maybe C under 2. The words in there that concern me are the releases conditional upon satisfactory installation of the buffer yards. Who's determining that and what is satisfactory? Dig a hole, throw it in there and walk away and you're there 5 minutes later to look at it, or does it need to live for a year? You come out after it's been attacked by salt for a year. What is satisfactory installation?
And so currently right now, the existing code says that right now we run into this scenario, just for the rest of the board's uptick, that when we get to a certificate of occupancy of a building, the building's ready to be occupied, right? It's ready to be furniture moved in. They've just graded the lot. The parking might be in. It might be striped. It might not be striped. If it's striped, it's a good day. But the landscaping is installed, right? Because it's just a gravel. It's just dirt.
Or it's November?
It's November. And so we run into the issue of landscaping all the time with site inspections that they're requesting a certificate of occupancy, but the landscaping is not installed. And there's no way once that certificate of occupancy is released for the city to go back and say, put your landscaping in. The certificate of occupancy is what we hold things to make sure all things are done and ready for the building. But knowing that the landscaping comes in separately and they want to get folks in and more furniture moved in and established, it's become a very strong push and pull between contractors. The existing code says we're only allowed to accept a bond or cash between November and April. I've changed that wording to include at any point in time, just to allow that flexibility. For any project, any given time of year, your certificate of occupancy can be issued if you agree to issue a bond or whatever for the amount of landscaping that's outstanding. That guarantees the city has the ability to hold that and make sure that it's installed. I think we put in here and provided estimate to be provided by the landscaping contractor of what that cost might be, in hopes that that cost is determined by a third party and not a city inspector or something like that may have the appearance of inflating or something like that. And then to release it to your point of satisfactory installation, correct, that could be better defined. I would assume, I know we're not going back
You don't have an
every year and
arborist.
looking at it. So
Who's coming by and saying that's good enough, I guess is kind of.
I assume if it looks like a tree's planted, that's probably the standard we go by.
I've had people go the other way. That's not good enough. That's not gonna live, so. You know,
And
if the city's cool with it, just 2 cents, I guess.
no, it's good feedback to have consistent enforcement is what that essentially boils down to. I'm not sure I can write a code based on that, but consistent enforcement and what that standard means at a policy level is probably better suited to that.
Yeah, not everything like it.
Can I ask a question? On number 10, let's see, number 10. Oh no, it must be 11. The escrow, where you're gonna do 1.5 times based on the landscaping bid. I'm wondering if it would make sense to do a set dollar amount that's reasonable per square foot, because if someone's doing a building that has very extensive landscaping based on what their business is going to be, 1.5 times their landscape bill is going to be very different and hurt a little bit more than 1.5 times somebody doing the minimum. So would there be a way to find out what this, and I know that number would change often, so I don't know how that could be figured, but just a thought.
We could write it 1.5 times required plantings. If they wish to go above and beyond the required planting, that wouldn't be counted for the escrow. We could write it that way to at least have the minimum covered at each time, because I get what you're saying. Because really the goal of this escrow is that should you not plant it, the city has that bond or cash to go and plant it for you, in which case we would do the bare minimum. We wouldn't do your full-blown additional. So.
Right, and I don't want people to not plan to do something fabulous just because it might not get done and they might have to set that money aside. So yeah, that's what I mean, Andrea.
Okay.
Awesome. Mr. Budke?
Yeah, one other thought, just going back to the shade trees in the parking lots. Because I kind of had like 2 simultaneous thoughts in my head here. One was just like, I have seen that like in other municipalities, right? Like in their zoning codes, that they have require shade trees or parking. It seems to be like an acknowledgement that there is like a benefit. There's a benefit, right? That like having these big expansive parking lots uncovered has an externality. It's the heat island effect, right? So you shade them. And then I've seen them measure that or enforce that through a couple different ways. Like sometimes it's like X number of feet between trees, or maybe like 1 tree per X number of parking stalls. So I'm not sure what would be best here.
It's tough in this area with the amount of darkness and facilities trying to do light poles. If you're trying to mix light poles in with trees, it makes it really tough.
Okay. Jamie's got like to go with trees.
And they grow and they get brighter. Yep. But I mean, that's one consideration. The only tough thing we've had with landscape people is just like, okay, so what happens when he just spent this much on a light pole and this much on a tree? What happens when that tree grows and canopy is out? You've got no light now and people are feeling unsafe in the shaded area, and it's dark from 5 o'clock on now in about a month, That's one argument I've heard to that, Andrew. We're doing our designs and working with people and have different things. It's just one argument I've heard.
We require, what we're proposing is that it be required for parking lots of 50 stalls or more. So your smaller lots not needing a parking island. Distributed throughout the parking lot is kind of the general consensus. We previously had tree canopy coverage and percentages and things like that, and that got to be a landscape architect level of design that as a staff we were struggling to educate ourselves enough to maintain it and understand it, as well as get that out of contractors to provide. So we honestly haven't been following it in terms of enforcement from the existing code, because our local contractors maybe don't have that skill set to provide that level of detail that we were asking for, but we know what's going to cover. I couldn't tell you, I think maybe some of them had like a 75% coverage rate. Well, the contractor knows it'll be covered, but can't guarantee it'll be 75%. And so we thought a general distributed throughout left the common sense level enough to be able to approach it that way. But I have seen it, to your point, of requiring a canopy coverage or something like that.
I think flexibility is key.
Is one of the areas where common sense can kind of reign a little bit in terms of that. And so we did try to, where we were maybe over-regulating, trying to give a little bit more realistic approach to it. So if it becomes we're struggling with folks to get them to comply and we need to go back to an over-regulated, we certainly can come forward with a code adjustment and be like, this is too big. We're having troubles with it.
Okay, we good? Satisfied? Good discussion. All right, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. 4-2 is preliminary approved. Item 5, reports from the planning department.
Well, I do have a quick update just on signs from what City Council discussed. You'll recall last month we had the billboard at Denny's Tavern as well as the Oxford Park sign. Those were brought forward to City Council. The billboard discussion, Council shared your thoughts on lack of enthusiasm for billboards in town and kind of the intensity that they're coming in at. And so the Denny's Tavern request was postponed at Council until the City Attorney can look into options for potentially limiting billboards or how we might be able to tackle those going forward. So that's postponed. The City Attorney's Office is still working on that item. We'll bring it forward back to the Planning Commission when we do hear something on that. Most likely probably going to result in a sign subcommittee to kind of address maybe what comes out of that. But we'll keep you updated and wanted to give you an update about what Council kind of discussed with that. It was in alignment with what the Commission had shared as well. The other one, the Oxford Park sign, they had initially denied the request out of concerns with some of the existing outward-facing signs on the ball diamonds, as well as some concerns as well with just general non-conforming signs around town. That item, so they preliminarily denied it. They reconsidered it last night at City Council, and so it is approved now. But the issue of non-conforming signs was brought up. Our Department of Building Safety kind of does the enforcement of signs. So they've taken the kind of initiative, and part of the City Council requested an increase in enforcement of just signs in general around town. Building Safety is kind of taking that on and trying to address it. So wanted to give you guys a discussion of what happened post P&Z and what Council had said. So.
Thank you. Anything else, Andrew?
No.
Any other business?
Can we keep meeting in this room instead of downstairs?
We're in the new digs next month.
Are we?
I think in the
Are we
new
back
digs,
finally?
I will be over at City Council.
Let's see.
You should have all the tech lined up for that.
Can I ask a quick question, just something real quick that we had talked about? Could somebody go and check and see where we are and how we're enforcing these large signs so that people know what's coming in the neighborhood?
You're talking development signs?
Yep.
Okay. Yep, we'll look into that.
Thank you.
All right. That's it.
To adjourn.
Second.
Third, fourth, so moved.
Meeting adjourned.